Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and thank you so much for joining us. It's a very exciting day for us in Africa and around the world. We have a stellar group of people discussing various matters that's all close to our hearts. And first of all, thank you to Site Global for helping us host this. Big shout out to Rebecca Wright, where it's about 2 in the morning and helping us run this thing from a technical point. Thank you, Rebecca, as well as John Howell from Bench Events and Aviadev, helping us on the technical side and also moderating a very important session for us later. We have a long day ahead of us. We have 5 sessions, approximately an hour each, covering various topics. So for those of you who have other commitments in between, you are welcome to hop on, hop off as your schedules allow. If you can stay with us for the duration, fabulous. We'd love to hear your input, your questions. Please try to keep your questions on the Q&A panel, and you can gladly have your conversations and comments in the chat panel. These are sensitive issues. Some more sensitive than others. Even so, please keep your comments as constructive as possible. But yes, we'd love to hear from you. We'll try and address as many questions as possible. We may not get through all of them. If not, we'll definitely address all those questions and get back to you at a later stage. This session will be recorded and transcribed and issued next week to all the participants. Now, I'm very, very happy to have the CEO of Site Global with us today, Mr. Didier Scaillet, connecting with us all the way from Europe, and he is going to help us open the show and do a welcome for us. So if I may hand over to Didier, thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Well, thank you, Tess. First of all, thank you personally for putting this together. And obviously, in these most daring times, I think this initiative is more than welcome. So certainly want to thank the entire board of South Africa, as well as all of the speakers and panelists. You sent me the program, and it's just a very, very high quality program altogether. So tremendous initiative at times where I think we all need to have better information, better intelligence, market data, market analysis in terms of where we're going. So, the selection of speakers and the topics is extremely timely and extremely important. I'd like to start maybe by simply stating the obvious, which, this is absolutely unprecedented times. And I've heard that left, right, and center, obviously, ever since it started. But let me put some perspective on, I guess, the impact and I guess the scale and speed of what we're dealing with. I mean, and that really what making it very unique. We reckon that the COVID-19 pandemic started in December 19. There's now some suggestion that it might have even started in August, but no matter what, December is kind of when we saw in Q1 in the Hubei province of China, the first cases. Now, the public health emergency of international concern proclaimed by the WHO was on January 30th, which really is yesterday when you think about it. So as of today, and I'm talking June 11th number here, we have more than 7 million cases, actually 7,360,000 to be precise, cases in the world in 188 countries and territories. Now the UN is a little north of 200 members. So it's basically the entire globe that's been affected. Over 416,000 deaths. The good news, though, is over 3.5 million people that actually have recovered from this. So, in as much as the death toll is enormous, the recovery is also pretty significant. I guess the impact is on multiple levels. There is clearly a huge economic impact, estimated that, over $300 billion would be the cost of the pandemic simply on the supply chain. So simply on the fact that we've seen disruption when it comes to production of raw material all the way to transformation of these. The global insurance industry is going to absorb over $200 billion overall, and that's from Lloyd's estimates. So that actually is going to be the costliest disaster in human history, and by quite a range. So, clearly everyone being impacted, the retail sector, from the figures that I've seen from actually Africa, EU, and Latin America seems to be on the same pattern. From that standpoint, is about 40% down in retail. North America and Middle East is about 60% down. So, very, very significant impact. I mentioned supply chain shortages, drugs, protection equipment, food, which is, clearly has always been a concern from an African standpoint, but it's estimated that about 130 million people will be food deprived at the moment in April, and that's going to go up to 265 million people. So very, very significant impact. Also from a social standpoint, energy sector, oil and gas. We've seen on Monday, the 20th of April. The price of oil going down. So basically, oil companies paying to offload oil because they simply didn't have the capacity to stock it. So, very, very significant. Again, very unique, never happened before. We're back to about $20 roughly. But again, still way below what is the equilibrium prices for oil, which is at roughly $35 to $40. That's the economic impact. The social and impact is tremendous as well. We've seen culture literally being shut down. Theater, cinema, museums, churches, mosques, all of that basically being totally shut down, which I think has presented in itself a lot of challenges from a humanity standpoint. Simply our ability to get enriched by one another, to get together, has been drastically impacted. Series of political tensions. We've seen those in Iran. We've seen the resurrection of tension between South Korea and Japan. We're all witnessing what's happening in North America at the moment, and actually quite on a global basis. Again, from an African standpoint, Pierre Nkurunziza. So actually, my condolences to anyone who's from Burundi, who I know is going into national mourning at the moment, and will be for the next few days. But again, high suspicion that this is linked to COVID-19 as well. So after 15 years in power and right post-election, when he was supposed to relinquish power in August, it happened. We're looking at about 200,000 cases in Africa at the moment. Unfortunately, we've seen the pandemic kind of going in waves, starting in Asia, going to Europe, going to North America. Unfortunately, Africa might still be in a mid-stage of this. The good news is that obviously there is an awful lot of lessons learned from what happened in other parts of the world. The impact on us as incentive travel, clearly, our motto from the very get-go has been postpone, don't cancel. So basically push your events. We're seeing evidence that this has happened. Actually, discussing with some of our Asian professionals, they are starting to see rebooking Q4 of this year, but certainly Q1, Q2 of next year. Feeling pretty positive about the fact that the industry is coming back. A lot of the industry has turned into survival mode, no doubt about that. We included as a society. But we also quickly shifting to the what's next. What is the new reality going to look like? And some of the things that are absolutely clear, we set a business recovery task force to look at, okay, what is it actually going to look like? Well, one, it's going to be new standards and new norms. And, the EIC, so the Events Industry Council, which is made up of 33 associations representing over 100,000 professionals, is actively working on what would these new standards look like. And they will be physical standards. So when you had a ballroom that could host 200 people, we may be down to 100 or to 80. Round of tents is something that we may look at in pictures and share with our grandchildren and say, that once happened, but it might no longer be the case. I think, clearly sanitization procedures are being heavily updated. The airline industry, and I know that's part of the panel that you'll have later today, but will be deeply impacted, not only from the plane in itself, but I always say my biggest worry is not necessarily the plane, is getting to the plane. So clearly, the security lanes that we used to see are something of the past. I don't think you will see that level of congestion. But so airports that used to handle, 5 million passengers a year might be able to handle 2 million. I think we'll see an evolution in technology as well. I think iris recognition is going to come right on track after the biometric passport. I think we're going to go one level further in terms of speeding these. So I guess the plane is one thing, but again, the airport infrastructure and what it means to travel will be absolutely drastically impacted. I think also for a very foreseeable future, all of the consumer research that I have seen is showing that transcontinental travel is probably a year and a half away from us. And therefore, that's where I absolutely want to congratulate on this initiative, because the business recovery is going to come from a national level and from a regional level. So I think we will see intra-region business come back first, specifically when it comes to group. So Europeans will likely stay in Europe. If they have to venture somewhere else, Africa would definitely be there. But I think Africa in itself, in its own market, is going to be the prime source of recovery, the same way that we're going to see North America, again, staying a little closer to home. Where I have a lot of optimism is in incentive travel in itself. Again, very, very timely conversation for a number of reasons. One, we've seen a shift in also how destination are approaching group business. I listened a few weeks ago an interview to an interview of the mayor of Venice, who said the Venetians have rediscovered Venice. And so do we really want to go back to the number game of how many million people do we host? Or do we want to be slightly more selective? And he was even mentioning potentially having quotas around people visiting Venice. Again, we are handling small groups, very high spenders. So there might be an opportunity there for our industry to clearly be positioned as, again, smaller group, higher yield. And the last component is that we do not have to go to major hubs. I think there will still be some concerns out there about going to major hubs simply because of the density of population that you're dealing with. And clearly, as incentive travel, we, again, very high end, very small groups, and we could go anywhere. So we may go to a hub, but simply transit from there and then cover the rest of the territory, and we don't need massive infrastructure to create very unique motivational experiences. So again, I think starting from maybe a gloom and doom, but brutal facts and reality that we all dealing with, certainly a huge message of hope and recovery. As I mentioned, we're starting to see it in certain parts of the world. I think we will continue to see it. And I think as an incentive travel industry, we will, within the group MICE segment, we will be probably the first one to rebound. It's also linked to the fact that people have actually already earned their awards and their prizes, so they feel entitled that they should enjoy it. Clearly couldn't happen in the later part of 2020, but certainly we're seeing an awful lot of them saying, we want to make it happen in 21. So again, very, very timely initiative. I think Africa was certainly on a huge growth path altogether. witnessing a 3.7% increase in GDP over the last few 5 years. And with 1.3 billion inhabitants, certainly a continent that's poised for growth. This might be a pause moment, a rethink moment, but I think it will come back. It will come back stronger. And again, Tess and the rest of South Africa, congratulations for putting this together.